What is up, y'all? It is the Project Photography back with another video, and today, before we get started, make sure to follow all of my socials down in the description bar below. But today, I'm teaching you guys how to get infinite dynamic range for your landscape photography. Let's just say you're shooting a very high contrast scene with very bright highlights, very dark shadows. This will be the perfect thing to get you essentially infinite dynamic range. We're doing it through a process called HDR, where we shoot 5 or however many images you want of the same composition, but at different exposures, and stack them together and post to get an editable file, which has essentially infinite dynamic range. But before we get started, there's a few things that you should know. Make sure you got a tripod for a stable composition, and then make sure you have you can either use a wide angle or a telephoto lens. Most of the time, I do like using a telephoto lens, mainly because we want to limit as much movement as possible. If we're zooming in, there won't be as much movement to capture. And the second part is to make sure there's actually not that much movement going on in the frame, kind of like I mentioned before. Because if we have a lot of movement, there'll be a lot of ghosting introduced, and that's not very pleasing to look at in the photos. Then last but not least, make sure to use it only generally in high contrast situations, because it does put a lot of editing process on your computer and just makes it a little bit slower. But once you have all those things, then you're good to go and go ahead and start shooting your HDR. So let's cut right to the B-roll and get right to it. All right, y'all, so now let's go ahead and start shooting. And as you guys can see, I have my tripod set up here with my 24 to 200. That is the setup that I'm going to be using for this photo at least. And then I'm gonna put you guys on my tripod, actually show you guys what I'm doing here. So now you guys can go ahead and see what I am actually gonna be doing here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my composition. Just something like that should be fine. Nothing too crazy, to be honest with you. Make sure our horizons are level. And then we're gonna go ahead and make sure that our focus is correct. So I always want to be manually focusing, especially just when I'm shooting landscape photography in general. But for an HDR, manual focus is definitely required. So something like that should be fine. And then I just want to go ahead and create an even exposure. So something like this should be fine. Probably around here. That looks good. So I got an ISO of 50, and then we have f8 aperture, and then 1/640th of a second. And then that's essentially it for everything else. Now what we want to go ahead and do is set the release mode to a timer. And this is important because if you don't do this, it won't capture it automatically. You have to continue to press it, and that's kind of annoying. Now let's go ahead and move to what the actual bracketing part is. So it's called auto bracketing. You want to click on that. And then for number of shots, it's of course how many shots you want to take. I generally like about 5. You don't really want to go over this, to be honest, because if you do, then like I said before, the more footage you take, the more chances that ghosting can occur. And now the increment here, so what can happen is it'll essentially go up by that increment per shot. So let's just say I have a 2-stop increment. The second shot that I take will essentially be 2 stops down, and then the next shot I take will be 2 stops down, and then so forth. So for me, I think an increment of 1 is fine. Sometimes if I feel like the situation is way too bright, like crazy bright and so forth, then I'll go ahead and change that to maybe like a 2. But for the most part, I think 1 should be fine. So now all you literally have to do is just go ahead and click that and let it go ahead and capture it. It's gonna capture 5 exposures, as you can see here. And that's it. And as you can see here, we captured those 5 different exposures, and 2 of them were underexposed. 1 was at the regular exposure, and then 2 of them were overexposed. And yeah, guys, it was literally that easy. All you had to do was just go into the settings and click literally a button, and you're done. Now you have your 5 exposures, and you can go ahead and go back to your studio and go ahead and edit it. So that's exactly what we're gonna be doing. Take us back to my studio and show you guys how to actually edit this. So I'll see you guys there. All right, so now we are back in the studio. I'm gonna be showing you what exactly you have to do in order to get a full HDR. So first of all, I recommend that you get all of your files. So these are the 5 exposures I captured, and put it into a folder. And then I'll probably title it HDR, and then whatever the number was, 7104 is the number for the first frame. Then we're gonna go ahead and open up our Lightroom. And then once we have the Lightroom open, we can go ahead and grab all of our 5 photos, throw it into Lightroom, go ahead and import that. And then from there, what we're gonna do is press on the first one and then hold down Shift, click on the last one so we select all 5 of them. Right click that, photo merge, HDR. And then from there is going to go ahead and merge all the photos. And these settings on the right here, de-ghosting is if there's a lot of movement. Usually I have to keep it on low, but it depends how much movement you have in your frame. Like I said earlier though, the less movement, the better. So make sure you try to get that well in camera. So it's going to come out to a photo like this. Now it looks extremely similar to the first frame because it's kind of based off of that first frame. But then we go ahead and end up with an editable file like this. Now, as you see, the first frame and this frame, it's essentially identical. What I like to do is go ahead and delete the other 5. Just go ahead and remove them from Lightroom. And then, go ahead and just edit this photo like a regular RAW. And it honestly is that easy. It literally just took like 2 minutes to go ahead and do that. What I want to go ahead and do is edit this photo and then show you what the difference is between this photo and the last photo. So I just did the exact same edit here on these 2 images. But there's a very minor difference. You can tell, especially in the noise here in the shadows, that there is more noise with the non-HDR version. But here is another example of where I feel like the HDR did a huge job. As you can see with this image, we have much less noise versus this image, and it really makes a difference, especially in those very, very high contrast situations. So yeah, guys, that is essentially it for how to edit and create an HDR, help you get unlimited dynamic range in your landscape photography. Let me know what you think about this video and this tutorial. And anyways, guys, thank you so much for experiencing the world with me. Please feel free to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.